My wife came home last Tuesday with a smug look that immediately put me on alert. She'd been to another one of those feminist book club meetings, and something was different. Not the usual righteous energy she'd have after discussing workplace inequality or whatever topic they covered that week. This was calculated. Predatory, almost. "We need to talk about your toxic masculinity," she announced, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter like she was delivering a court summons. I looked up from my laptop where I was finishing some work. "My what now?" "Your behaviors. The way you dismiss women's concerns. Your need to always be right. The microaggressions." She crossed her arms, studying me like a scientist observing a lab rat. "Here's the thing about living with someone for 6 years. You know their patterns. You know when they're being genuine and when they're performing." This wasn't my wife talking. This was someone else's script coming out of her mouth. "Give me an example of these microaggressions," I said, closing the laptop and giving her my full attention. "See? Right there. You're being defensive. You're demanding proof instead of listening to my lived experience." I almost laughed. I asked for clarification. "That's not defensive. That's basic communication." There it is again. "You're mansplaining communication to me." Now I knew something was seriously wrong. My wife had never used terms like mansplaining or lived experience before joining this book club 3 months ago. She was testing me, running some kind of social experiment, and frankly, it was insulting. "Are you recording this conversation?" I asked. She blinked, caught off guard. "What? No. Why would you ask that?" "Because you're acting like you're collecting data, not having a discussion with your husband." I stood up and walked to the kitchen, deliberately calm. "So let me ask you directly. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here?" "I'm trying to help you grow as a person, to recognize your problematic patterns." Problematic patterns. I repeated her words back to her, letting them hang in the air. "And who diagnosed these patterns?" "Your book club friends." Her jaw tightened. "They help me see things more clearly." So you discussed our private relationship with a group of women I've never met. Let them analyze my behavior based on your one-sided reports, and now you're here to implement their recommendations. That's not. You're twisting this. I'm clarifying this. I opened the refrigerator and grabbed a Coke, taking my time. "Here's what's going to happen. You can either tell me exactly what game you're playing, or you can find somewhere else to conduct your little psychology experiment. I'm not your test subject." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning. Whatever script she'd prepared for this conversation, my response wasn't in it. "You're being paranoid," she finally said. "I'm just trying to improve our relationship. By attacking my character based on outside opinions? That's not improvement, that's sabotage." I leaned against the counter, studying her face. "Let me guess. Tomorrow you'll create another conflict. Test how I respond to criticism. See if I raise my voice so you can report back that I'm aggressive." The flash of recognition in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. "Next week, maybe you'll question my decision-making. Tell me I'm controlling when I express an opinion. Build a case study about toxic male behavior." I took a sip of my Coke, keeping my voice level. Did I miss anything? Or is that pretty much the playbook? She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since she'd walked in, she looked uncertain. "Here's the problem with your little experiment," I continued. "You're not studying my behavior. You're manufacturing it, creating conflict to justify predetermined conclusions. That's not psychology, that's manipulation. You're overreacting to a simple conversation about personal growth. No, I'm responding appropriately to psychological manipulation." I set the Coke down and looked directly at her. "And here's how this ends. You can either come clean about what you and your friends are really doing, or I'll assume you've decided our marriage is less important than your social validation project." She stood there, caught between doubling down and backing off. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. "I think you should sleep in the guest room tonight," she said finally, "until you can approach this with more maturity." I almost smiled. Even her attempt to punish me was textbook manipulation. Create conflict, then frame my reasonable response as the problem. "Actually, you know what? You're right." I walked past her toward the stairs. "I should definitely remove myself from this toxic environment." Good thinking. Wait, that's not what I meant. But I was already heading upstairs. Not to the guest room, though. I went to our bedroom, pulled out a suitcase, and started packing. If she wanted to play games, she could play them alone. 20 minutes later, she found me loading clothes into the car. "Where are you going?" "This is ridiculous." I just wanted to have a conversation about our relationship. No, you wanted to conduct an experiment on our relationship. There's a difference. I closed the trunk and turned to face her. When you decide you want to have an actual conversation with your husband, instead of treating him like a case study, call me. Until then, I'll be staying somewhere that doesn't require me to defend my basic humanity. You can't just leave because I brought up some valid concerns. I'm not leaving because of your concerns. I'm leaving because of your methods. I got in the car and rolled down the window. Your friends convinced you to test me? Well, congratulations. You got your result. I'm someone who doesn't tolerate being manipulated. Experiment concluded. As I drove away, I could see her in the rearview mirror, standing in the driveway with her phone already out, probably texting her research team about this unexpected development in their study. The thing is, I wasn't angry. I was disappointed. The woman I married wouldn't have played these games. But somewhere along the way, she decided that our relationship was something to be fixed rather than cherished, that I was a problem to be solved rather than a partner to be respected. Well, she definitely solved something, just not what she thought she was solving. 3 days into my hotel stay, the call started. First came the guilt trip, then the anger. Finally, the negotiation phase. You're being childish, she said during Wednesday's call, running away instead of working through our problems. I didn't run away. I removed myself from a toxic situation. There's a difference. Everything is toxic to you now. Maybe that says more about you than about me. Classic deflection. Accuse the target of the exact behavior you're exhibiting. I'd seen this playbook before in corporate environments. Create chaos, then blame others for not handling it well. Tell you what, I said, sitting in my hotel room with a clear head for the first time in months. I'll come back home Friday evening. We can have that conversation you claim you wanted. But it's going to be on equal terms, not with you psychoanalyzing everything I say. She agreed, but I could hear the smugness creeping back into her voice. She thought she'd won. Friday night, I walked into what felt like an ambush. She wasn't alone. 2 women I'd never met were sitting in my living room, laptops open, notebooks ready. One was recording on her phone. What's this? I asked, not moving past the entryway. These are my friends from book club. They wanted to mediate our discussion. Make sure we both feel heard. I looked at the 3 of them, then at the setup. This wasn't mediation. This was an intervention. Or more accurately, it was a performance with an audience. Turn off the recording, I said to the woman with the phone. We're just documenting the process for accountability. She replied, not complying. Turn it off, or I leave right now. My wife shot her friend a look, and reluctantly, the recording stopped, or at least appeared to stop. See, my wife said to her friends. Controlling behavior. He can't handle being held accountable. Actually, I can't handle being secretly recorded in my own home without consent. But please, continue demonstrating your commitment to healthy communication. The friends exchanged glances. They'd expected me to be angry, defensive, maybe even aggressive. Instead, I was calm and pointing out the obvious hypocrisy of their methods. Let's start with why you felt the need for an audience, I said, taking a seat across from them but not getting comfortable. What exactly are you afraid I'll do in a private conversation with my wife? We're here for support, the second friend chimed in. Women need solidarity when confronting toxic male behavior. Toxic male behavior like asking for privacy in my own marriage, or like expecting my wife to discuss our relationship with me before discussing it with strangers. You're deflecting, my wife said. This is exactly what we're talking about. Your inability to accept criticism. I accept valid criticism. I don't accept ambush therapy sessions run by people who've never met me, but somehow know everything about my character flaws. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, deliberately slow and non-threatening. Every movement was being analyzed, cataloged, prepared for discussion later. Here's what I find interesting, I said, opening the refrigerator and grabbing a water bottle. You're studying toxic masculinity by creating the exact conditions most likely to provoke it. It's like studying allergic reactions by throwing peanuts at people. We're creating a safe space for honest dialogue, the first friend insisted. Safe for whom? You've got me outnumbered 3-1. You attempted to record me without permission, and you're analyzing my every word and gesture. This isn't dialogue. This is a tribunal. My wife's face was getting red. You're making this about you again. Classic narcissistic behavior. I'm making this about respect, which apparently is a foreign concept now. I sat back down, opened my water, and looked directly at her. But let's play your game. You want to analyze behavior? Let's analyze yours. The room went quiet. 3 months ago, you joined this book club. Since then, you've become critical of everything I do, say, or think. You've shared intimate details of our relationship with strangers. You've attempted to secretly record private conversations. You've ambushed me with an intervention I never agreed to. And now you're using psychological terminology to pathologize normal human responses to abnormal treatment. I took a sip of water, letting that sink in. So tell me, which one of us is exhibiting toxic behavior here? You're manipulating the narrative, the second friend said. I'm stating facts. You're welcome to correct any of them. They couldn't, and we all knew it. This is why toxic men are so dangerous, my wife said, looking to her friends for validation. They're so good at turning things around, making themselves the victim. Or maybe, I said, standing up again. When you create artificial problems, you get artificial solutions. When you manufacture drama, you get dramatic responses. When you treat your husband like a test subject, he starts behaving like he's being experimented on. I walked toward the front door. Where are you going? My wife called out. Back to my hotel, where I don't have to defend my basic humanity to a jury of people who've already decided I'm guilty. You can't keep running away from difficult conversations. I turned back to face all three of them. I'm not running from difficult conversations. I'm refusing to participate in psychological manipulation disguised as relationship improvement. There's a difference, and deep down, all of you know it. The first friend spoke up. Maybe we should reschedule this when emotions aren't so high. The emotions are exactly as high as they should be, I replied. When someone attempts to manipulate you, feeling manipulated is the appropriate response. I opened the front door. When you decide you want to be married to me instead of studying me, call me. Until then, your research project is on indefinite hold. As I left, I could hear them immediately starting to debrief the session, analyzing my responses, planning their next move. They had no idea I was planning mine. Saturday morning, I did something they didn't expect. I came home, not to reconcile or apologize, but to collect some things and handle business. My wife was in the kitchen, clearly surprised to see me. I thought you were staying at the hotel until I called. I'm staying at the hotel until this psychological experiment ends. But I still live here, pay the mortgage, and have responsibilities. I walked past her to grab my mail from the counter. Don't mind me. She followed me around like I was defusing a bomb, watching my every move, probably memorizing details for her next book club report. We could try talking again. Just the two of us this time. Sure. Right after you explain why you thought bringing strangers into our private business was appropriate. They're not strangers. They're my friends. They're strangers to me. And they're strangers to our relationship. But somehow they're qualified to judge it. She didn't have an answer for that, so she switched tactics. You know what your problem is? You can't handle strong women. You need me to be submissive and agreeable. I stopped sorting through the mail and looked at her directly. Is that what you think strength looks like? Ambushing your husband with a panel of judges? Recording private conversations without consent? Treating your marriage like a research project? I think strength looks like standing up for yourself and not accepting toxic behavior. Then we agree on something. I won't accept toxic behavior either. The difference is, I can identify it accurately. She was getting frustrated. Whatever response she'd expected, this wasn't it. Your defensiveness proves my point. My clarity threatens your narrative. There's a difference. I finished with the mail and headed upstairs to grab some clothes. She followed, still trying to provoke a reaction. This is what emotional unavailability looks like. You shut down instead of engaging with criticism. I engage with criticism. I don't engage with manipulation disguised as criticism. In our bedroom, I started packing another bag. She sat on the bed, watching, analyzing. The book club thinks you might be a narcissist. I almost laughed. The book club that's never met me has diagnosed me with a personality disorder based on your one-sided reports of our private conversations, based on your behavior patterns, such as your need to always be right, your inability to accept responsibility, your controlling nature. I zipped up the bag and turned to face her. Let me ask you something. Before you joined this book club, did you think I was a narcissist? Controlling? Toxic? She hesitated. I wasn't aware of the patterns. Or there weren't any patterns until you started looking for them. Amazing how that works. I headed for the door, but she blocked my path. You're doing it again. making me question my own perceptions. That's gaslighting. No, that's critical thinking. Gaslighting would be if I told you things happened that didn't happen. I'm asking you to examine whether your new friends might have an agenda. What agenda? Validation through victimhood, creating problems to solve, feeling important by fixing other people's relationships. She stared at me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I married, the one who could think for herself. They're trying to help me. They're trying to help themselves. To feel superior by convincing you that you're a victim and I'm an oppressor. It's a simple dynamic, and you fell for it. You think I'm stupid. I think you're being manipulated by people who are very good at manipulation. There's a difference. I gently moved past her and headed downstairs. She followed, more desperate now. So what are you saying? That our problems aren't real? I'm saying our problems weren't this bad until you started treating me like a case study instead of a husband. At the front door, I turned back one last time. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you exactly what you and your friends want. Space to analyze, dissect, and theorize about my behavior. Take all the time you need. Write your reports. Draw your conclusions. That's not what we want. Sure it is. You want to prove I'm everything they told you I am. So prove it. But do it without me present, because I refuse to participate in my own character assassination. You're abandoning our marriage. I'm protecting it from people who want to destroy it for their own entertainment. I walked to my car, and she followed me outside. How long is this going to go on? Until you decide whether you want to be married to me or to their opinions about me. It's not that simple. Actually, it is exactly that simple. You're choosing between loyalty to your husband and loyalty to people who convinced you your husband is the enemy. I got in the car and started the engine. When you figure out which loyalty matters more, you know where to find me. As I drove away, I could see her standing in the driveway, phone already in her hand. No doubt calling for emergency consultation about this latest development in their behavioral study. The irony was perfect. They wanted to study toxic masculinity, but they'd created the exact conditions that push reasonable men toward unreasonable behavior. Then they'd act surprised when men responded to manipulation with resistance. Well, they were getting a different kind of response from me. I was giving them exactly what they claimed to want: distance from toxic male behavior. They just hadn't expected me to be the one creating that distance. Their experiment was about to take a very interesting turn. Sunday afternoon, my wife made a mistake. She pocket-dialed me while I was reading at the hotel. I almost hung up when I realized she was in the middle of a conversation with her book club friends. But something made me keep listening. He's not reacting the way we expected, she was saying. Usually when you confront toxic behavior, men get angry, defensive, start yelling. That's because he's a covert narcissist, one of the friends replied. They're much more dangerous because they appear calm and reasonable while they manipulate you. But he hasn't tried to manipulate me. He just left. That's the manipulation. He's trying to make you chase him, make you think you need him. I sat up straighter. These women had an answer for everything, didn't they? If I got angry, I was overtly toxic. If I stayed calm, I was covertly toxic. There was literally no response that wouldn't confirm their predetermined conclusion. Maybe we need to push harder, the third voice suggested. Create a situation where his true nature comes out. How do we do that? Public embarrassment works well. Call him out in front of people he respects. Men can't handle having their reputation challenged. My wife's voice was hesitant. I don't know. That seems cruel. Cruel? He's been psychologically abusing you for years. You just didn't recognize it before we helped you see it. Was he, though? I mean, looking back, I can't point to specific incidents. That's how good he is at it. Covert abuse leaves no obvious marks. But the damage is real. I listened as they spent the next 20 minutes essentially rewriting our entire relationship history. Every disagreement became evidence of my controlling nature. Every time I'd been right about something became proof of my need to dominate. Every moment of leadership or decision-making was reframed as toxic masculinity. It was impressive in a terrifying way. They were gaslighting her about gaslighting. I think you should threaten divorce, one friend finally said. Make him think he's going to lose everything. That's when the mask comes off. But what if he actually agrees to divorce? Then you'll know he never really loved you. Either way, you win. You either expose his true nature or escape from someone who doesn't value you. The call ended, and I sat there processing what I'd just heard. They weren't trying to help her improve our relationship. They were actively working to destroy it. And they'd convinced her it was for her own good. But I'd also heard something else in her voice. Doubt. She was starting to question their methods, even if she couldn't admit it yet. Tuesday evening, she showed up at my hotel. "We need to talk," she said, standing in my doorway with that same determined look she'd had a week ago. But there was something different now. Less confidence, more desperation. In private this time, I hope. Yes, just us. I let her in, curious to see how this would play out. "I've been thinking about what you said, about choosing between loyalty to you and loyalty to my friends. And I think maybe there's truth in what you're saying." She sat on the edge of the bed, looking more vulnerable than she had in months. "But I'm also scared. What if they're right? What if I'm making excuses for toxic behavior because I'm scared to be alone?" "Then let's find out," I said, "but not through their methods. Not through manipulation and manufactured conflict." "How?" "Couples therapy, with an actual licensed therapist. Someone who doesn't have a predetermined agenda." She looked surprised. "You'd be willing to do that?" "I'd be willing to work on our relationship with a professional. I'm not willing to be psychoanalyzed by your book club friends. They think couples therapy is just a way for abusive men to manipulate therapists." "Of course they do. Because if we went to therapy and it turned out our problems were normal relationship issues that could be worked through, it would undermine their entire narrative." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know what to believe anymore." "Then believe in us. Not in them. Not in me, but in what we built together before they started tearing it apart." "But what if?" "What if what? What if I've ruined everything? What if I've pushed you too far and you can't forgive me?" For the first time in weeks, I saw my actual wife. Not the person her friends had turned her into, but the woman I'd married. "That depends," I said. "Are you ready to stop treating our marriage like a psychology experiment? Are you ready to kick the research committee out of our relationship?" "I think so. Yes." "Then we start there." She looked relieved, but also terrified. "They're not going to like this. They're not married to me. You are. Or at least, you were." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we need to decide if you still want to be. Because I won't live in a relationship where every word I say gets reported back to a panel of judges. I won't be married to someone who values outside opinions more than inside truth. I want to try. I want to fix this." "Then tomorrow, you make a choice. You either tell your friends that you're taking a break from their advice to work on your marriage, or you tell me that their validation is more important than our relationship." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm scared of losing you." "Then stop listening to people who are actively trying to make that happen." After she left, I realized something had shifted. The dynamic was changing. She was starting to see the manipulation for what it was. But I also knew her friends wouldn't give up easily. They had too much invested in proving their theory. If gentle persuasion hadn't worked, they'd escalate to more aggressive tactics. I needed to be ready for their next move. Wednesday evening, my wife called me in tears. "They want me to post about you on social media," she said, her voice shaking. "They wrote out a whole Facebook post about emotional abuse and toxic masculinity, and they want me to share it. With my name attached? They said I should warn other women about your behavior patterns." I felt my jaw clench. Public defamation was crossing a line I wouldn't tolerate. "What did you tell them?" I said I needed to think about it. "But they're pressuring me. They keep saying if I really want to heal, I need to expose the truth." The truth according to them. Yes. And honestly, I'm starting to see how twisted this has become. They want me to destroy your reputation based on their interpretation of conversations they've never heard. Finally, she was seeing it. "Where are you right now?" "At home. They're coming over in an hour for an intervention. They think you've manipulated me into doubting their guidance." Perfect. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Don't post anything on social media. Don't agree to anything. And whatever you do, don't let them know you're having second thoughts. Why? Because I'm coming over. And it's time we all had an honest conversation about what's really been happening here. An hour later, I walked into my own house to find the three women setting up what looked like a tribunal. Laptops open, notebooks ready, phones positioned to record. "Well, this is interesting," I said, setting down a folder I'd brought with me. "Having another research meeting? We're here to support her through your latest manipulation attempt," the first friend said. "My manipulation attempt. Convincing her that we're the problem instead of taking responsibility for your toxic behavior." I smiled and opened my folder. "Speaking of toxic behavior, I have something fascinating to share with all of you." My wife looked nervous. "What's in the folder?" "Screenshots," I said, pulling out printed pages. From social media posts, forum discussions, and messaging groups, all featuring our three researchers here. The room went silent. Turns out, this isn't their first time conducting relationship experiments on unsuspecting couples. I spread the papers on the coffee table so everyone could see. Here's a post from 6 months ago where they celebrated successfully breaking up another toxic couple. Here's a forum discussion about techniques for making men show their true colors through psychological pressure. The friends were turning pale. And here, I said, pulling out the best one, is a private message thread where they discuss keeping a research journal of different manipulation tactics and their success rates. My wife picked up one of the screenshots, her hands shaking. You've been documenting our relationship problems? For research purposes, the second friend said quickly, to help other women identify similar patterns. Without my knowledge or consent, I added, using private information about our marriage that you obtained through deception. We were trying to help, the first friend insisted. You were trying to validate your own importance by destroying other people's relationships. There's a difference. I sat down across from them, completely calm. Here's what's really been happening. You identified a stable, happy marriage and decided to turn it into a case study. You systematically convinced my wife that normal relationship dynamics were actually abuse. You coached her to create conflicts that didn't exist. And when I didn't react the way you wanted, you escalated your tactics. That's not true, the third friend said. Really? Then explain this. I pulled out another screenshot. A message from 2 days ago where you discussed pushing him to his breaking point so his true nature would emerge. My wife was reading through the papers, her face getting redder with each page. You wrote about our private conversations in detail, our arguments, our intimate moments, everything. We needed data to help you recognize the patterns, the first friend said. You needed content for your little psychology hobby, I corrected. And you found a willing participant who was naive enough to believe you actually cared about her welfare. We do care about her. You care about being right, about proving your theories, about feeling superior to the stupid women who stay with toxic men. I stood up and walked to the window. But here's where it gets really interesting. Want to know what the common factor is in all the relationships you've helped destroy? They didn't answer. The men were all stable, successful, and confident. The women were all going through transitions, feeling insecure, looking for guidance. You specifically target couples where you can easily manipulate the woman into doubting her own judgment. That's not. It's exactly what you do. You're predators who feed on relationship insecurity. You create problems to solve them. You manufacture drama for your own entertainment. My wife was staring at her friends like she was seeing them for the first time. Is this true? Have you done this to other couples? The silence was answer enough. Get out, she said quietly. We're trying to protect you. The second friend pleaded. Get out of my house, she said louder. All of you. Now, you're making a mistake, the first friend said as they gathered their things. He's manipulating you into choosing him over people who actually care about you. People who care about me don't secretly document my private life for their research projects, my wife replied. After they left, we sat in silence for a long time. I'm so sorry, she finally said. I know. How did you find all that information? I hired a private investigator. When people start systematically attacking your character, you need to know who you're dealing with. She looked through the papers again, shaking her head. I feel like such an idiot. You feel like someone who trusted the wrong people. There's a difference. Can you forgive me? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd married. Scared, embarrassed, but finally free from their influence. That depends on what happens next. What happens next is up to you, I said, sitting down beside her. But I need to be clear about something. This isn't just about forgiving. This is about whether we can rebuild trust. She nodded, wiping her eyes. What do you need from me? Complete transparency. No more outside consultants on our relationship. No more sharing private conversations with anyone unless we both agree. And therapy, like we discussed. Done. Anything else? Yes. You need to understand that I'm not the same person who left here 2 weeks ago. She looked up at me, concerned. What do you mean? I mean, watching your wife treat you like a laboratory experiment changes you. Having strangers analyze your character based on secondhand reports changes you. Being ambushed in your own home changes you. I understand. Do you? Because I spent 2 weeks questioning everything about our relationship. Wondering if you ever actually loved me, or if you just saw me as a project to fix. The tears started again. I did love you. I do love you. Then why was it so easy for them to convince you otherwise? She was quiet for a long moment. Because I was scared. Scared that maybe I wasn't good enough, smart enough, strong enough. And they made me feel like I was part of something important. Important enough to destroy your marriage. I didn't think that's what we were doing. I thought we were improving it. I stood up and walked to the mantel, looking at our wedding photos. Here's the thing about improvement. Real improvement builds on what's already good. What they were doing was demolition disguised as renovation. I see that now. I hope you do. Because this is your one chance to fix this. There won't be a second one. She stood up and walked over to me. What does that mean? It means if you ever let outside voices interfere in our relationship again, I'm gone. No discussion, no negotiation, no second chances. Gone. That won't happen. Good. Because I refuse to live in a marriage where I have to constantly defend my character to people who've already decided I'm guilty. We went to couples therapy. Dr. Chun was professional, unbiased, and quickly identified that our core relationship was solid. The problems were external interference and manufactured conflict. It took 6 months to fully repair the damage. 6 months of rebuilding trust, relearning how to communicate without her analyzing every word I said, and me learning to believe that she'd chosen our marriage over their validation. The book club friends tried to contact her several times, warning her that she was making a mistake, that I'd manipulated her into cutting them off. She blocked them completely. A year later, we heard through mutual acquaintances that they'd moved on to another couple, using the same playbook. That couple didn't survive it. Do you ever miss them? I asked her one evening. Sometimes I miss feeling like I was part of something bigger than myself. You are part of something bigger than yourself. You're part of us. She smiled and leaned against me on the couch. I never want to go through anything like that again. We won't, because now you know what real manipulation looks like. And it wasn't coming from me. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I'm just glad you did see it. Eventually, she was quiet for a moment. What would you have done if I hadn't? Exactly what I told you I'd do. I would have divorced you and moved on with my life. Really, because I'd rather be alone than be with someone who sees me as the enemy. And now I'm with someone who sees me as her partner. That's worth fighting for. The psychological experiment was over. The results were clear. I wasn't the toxic one in our relationship. They were.